Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. Senator, thank you for being here.
Great to be with you.
So we've covered the questions that you're asking a little bit in the last hour. I want to just go over what the questions that you have are, but then I really want to press you on who investigates and answers those questions for the American people. The questions first.
Well, the questions first are, who knew about the abrupt change that Donald Trump was about to make in tariff policy, and did they trade? Did they enrich themselves? There is a related question, of course, in one of Trump's tweets in which he encourages people to buy stock and then uses his own ticker as a plug to buy stock in his own company, whether he was also manipulating the market. These are just some of the questions, but I think your two questions are really interwoven in the manner you describe, and that is, there is a culture of impunity in the White House. They basically have defanged the Justice Department of any meaningful oversight by installing his criminal defense lawyers to run that department. They've fired the truly independent inspector generals. They've done away with all the safeguards. And so in that environment, you have these people of very dubious morals who are essentially told, there's no one watching. You can do whatever you want. No one's going to hold you accountable. It is an invitation to corruption. With the president trading in his own meme coin, for example, can we really expect that people around him aren't also trading to their personal benefit? And that's what's driving these questions and the need for an investigation.
What is the sort of capacity for any accountability when Republicans at least in the House for sure, and many in the Senate, act more like staffers in the White House's Office of Legislative Affairs?
Well, it is clearly diminished, but it is not zero. And I say that because I went through this in the first Trump administration. I was the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. They didn't want to investigate Russia's interference in our election. They didn't want to investigate the president's effort to extort Zelensky into helping him in the next election. But in the minority, we were nonetheless able to use the tools we had to do oversight. And we benefited enormously by encouraging whistleblowers to come forward. And they did, by asking the questions, by demanding answers. And we produced answers, and this is what we're going to have to do now. We're likewise seeing people step forward. I did a hearing a few days ago with Jamie Raskin, where we had witnesses who both quit and were fired at the Justice Department because they saw corrupt things going on that they would not participate in. And I think that hearing was powerful. We need to do a lot more of that. So we're not without our tools, even in the minority.
We covered that, and we had some of those individuals tell their story on our air. I want to ask you to step back just a little bit. I mean, since Cory Booker took to the floor, I think that, and I wouldn't just put Democratic voters under this umbrella, sort of the pro-democracy Americans, I think feel better about efforts to sort of acknowledge that even in the minority you have tools. How or has your thinking changed as you've seen the sort of audacity of Trump's first 78 days?
Well, I think there was a certain shock and awe, much as they hoped in the Trump administration, where they were throwing so much at the country as to overwhelm any defense, as to essentially intimidate people and discourage people and send them into a paralytic despair. We saw a real changing of the tide, I think, within the last week or 10 days. And that changing of the tide was manifest in Wisconsin, where you had that historic election for the seat on the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, and you had Elon Musk out there vigorously campaigning and associating his name and his money with that effort, roundly rejected and repudiated by voters in Wisconsin. You saw it in Cory Booker taking to the Senate floor for that historic address, and just the degree to which it just catalyzed the attention and interest of the American people. And we've seen it in these mass and growing protests around the country that, people are finding their voice. They are done being intimidated into silence. And I think we've crossed an important threshold where we are now finding our voice and using it effectively.
I mean, the other thing that's happened is Donald Trump's approval rating has plunged. He's at 41% overall approval and down to 40% on the economy. The tariffs are lower than that. When do you think Republicans will reassert themselves as elected officials?
Well, had he continued, and if he does continue along this tariff, destroy our economy, this self-inflicted wound to our economy, Republicans are going to abandon him like rats off a sinking ship. It's unsustainable. You already saw Republicans start to abandon him. We brought up a resolution Tim Kaine did, got 4 Republican votes, enough to get it passed in the Senate, to try to stop these destructive tariffs on Canada. That was Republicans not just speaking privately, not just speaking publicly, but actually voting against the president. And you're going to see more and more of that the more destruction he brings to our economy. Just watching this display in the administration as the president's aides were out there after this latest flip-flop saying it wasn't a flip-flop, it was planned that way. You know, you're just not smart enough to see the president's brilliant strategy, his art of the deal. And then the president saying, I don't know what these guys are talking about. I'm just shooting from the hip here. Sadly, I think people believe the president. He's just shooting from the seat of his pants, and he's hitting everybody in the worst of ways. So if he keeps that up, and he is probably just too capricious not to, I think you are going to see Republicans abandon him as they fear their own constituents more than they fear his wrath.
I don't want to nod completely to what is not normal. So let me ask you, as though we still lived in a normal, fully functioning democracy, when a U.S. senator raises questions about whether or not market manipulation or insider trading might have taken place, what should happen in terms of a real investigation that could answer those questions again for the American people?
Well, what should happen in a normal world, I think what would have happened in a pre-Trump normal world is it would be both parties asking the questions. Democrats and Republicans would come together to say, hey, why is it that the administration figures are not posting their transactions publicly the way they're supposed to? Because that's not happening. Was there trading going on? Why did we see this spike in activity right before the president's announcement? What accounts for that? Republicans would be joining and asking the questions. And frankly, there would be some independent body to ask those questions too. The last time I wrote a letter, as I did in the case of this insider trading issue, to the head of the Office of Government Ethics, he was fired before I could get an answer. And the problem is, who's there now that is going to be truly objective and do that oversight? At the Justice Department, which is run by his criminal defense lawyers, we can't hope they're going to do any scrutiny. If they're not going to hold people accountable, then somehow it has to get done. But in a normal world, the president would fear, and his people around him would fear, going to jail if they were insider trading. They have none of that fear. Chief Justice Roberts, in his immunity decision, said, Mr. President, you don't have to worry. It's why Chief Justice Roberts got thanked by Donald Trump at the State of the Union, because he's gotten a get-out-of-jail-free card. And the people around Trump feel they're going to get a pardon the day he leaves the Oval Office, so they've got a get-out-of-jail-free card from the Justice Department. So it falls on the rest of us in Congress to do something, and we're going to have to do the oversight that in a normal world would be very bipartisan, where there would be people in the executive doing it, we'd be doing it in Congress, but it's just not happening.
Donald Trump turned to one of his favorite topics, political retribution, yesterday, singling out with executive orders 2 former senior officials from his first term, Chris Krebs, who ran CISA, and Miles Taylor, who was a senior official at the Department of Homeland Security. Interestingly, in his comments, he went further than the text of the executive orders, but Michael Cohen and others have testified that everybody around Trump knows what he means, even if he doesn't say it. Is he moving faster? Is he doing exactly as you expected on the political retribution front? And what can be done to save people who, as Liz Cheney points out, only offense was telling the truth?
Well, Liz Cheney is exactly right about what's happening in terms of whether he's going faster than I expected. I would say in the beginning of the administration, yes, I was surprised about how quickly and destructively they were acting. I'm not surprised by anything anymore. You put, a henchman like Kash Patel in charge of the FBI, and this is the kind of thing you're going to get. But let's not mistake what's happening here. In the beginning, we saw the Trump Justice Department use the power of the Justice Department as a shield to protect the ones they wanted to protect. So for whatever weird reason, they wanted to protect the mayor of New York, who is charged with serious corruption charges, so they make that case go away. But now we're seeing something even more dangerous, which is we're seeing them use the Justice Department as a sword to go after the president's enemies. Chris Krebs, his transgression was saying that this was perhaps the safest election, the most well conducted in history from a national security point of view. That was true. His penalty is now to be under investigation by the Justice Department. They're going to bring the weight of that department potentially against him. This is how you lose a democracy, when the rule of law doesn't apply to certain people and it can be abused to use against other people. So there's no understating the severity of this. These two public servants did their jobs, they told the truth, and that is now a punishable offense in the Trump administration.
Senator Adam Schiff, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your candor about the first few days here.